Have you ever noticed how some incredibly talented people just don't seem to reach their full potential?
Yeah, while others, maybe starting with less obvious gifting, achieve just amazing things.
It's a bit of a puzzle, right?
Right.
But the answer might be simpler, maybe more fundamental than just raw talent. It could be about your core beliefs.
Your beliefs about where ability actually comes from.
So today, we're going to dig into Carol S. Dweck's really groundbreaking book, Mindset, The New Psychology of
And
Success.
this isn't, just about thinking positive thoughts or something superficial like that.
No, it's way deeper.
Mm.
It's about a fundamental framework that actually shapes how you see everything, success, failure, even putting in effort.
Absolutely. So our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack Dweck's core idea, the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset,
We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge,
and see how these mindsets show up in real life, like in sports and business.
even in relationships. And most importantly, give some practical ways to maybe cultivate a more, adaptive and resilient approach yourself.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding how just shifting your perspective can unlock a huge amount of potential. Sometimes potential you didn't even know was there.
Okay, so where should we start? Dweck's early research.
Yeah, let's start right there. It began with her watching kids working on these pretty difficult puzzles.
And she saw something interesting.
Really interesting. Some kids just got discouraged almost immediately, frustrated, gave up.
Okay.
But others, they kind of lit up. They saw the tough puzzle as like a fun challenge, an opportunity to figure something out, to learn.
Yeah, just from a puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that simple observation, that contrast, it basically sparked her whole lifelong investigation into these fundamental ways of thinking.
And that led her to define the fixed mindset first.
Right. So the fixed mindset, the core belief here is that your basic qualities, like your intelligence, your talents, they're just static. They're fixed traits.
Like you're born with a certain amount and that's it.
Pretty much. You either have it or you don't. That's the underlying assumption.
So if you believe that, what's your main goal then?
Well, the primary goal becomes proving that intelligence, proving that talent, constantly demonstrating that you have it to yourself and definitely to others.
Okay, I can see how that could be stressful.
Hugely. And critically, it often leads to this real fear of failure.
Because failure would mean you don't have it.
Exactly. It reflects badly on that fixed amount of talent you supposedly possess. So people become reluctant, very hesitant, to take on challenges where they might fail, where they might expose those perceived limits.
And what about effort? How does that fit in?
This is one of the most surprising parts, I think. Effort can actually be seen negatively, almost as a sign of low ability.
Wait, trying hard means you're not smart.
The internal logic can be something like, if I were really talented, if I were really smart, this wouldn't be so hard. I wouldn't have to try so much.
Wow, okay. So setbacks must be absolutely devastating then.
They can be, because they aren't just temporary hiccups. They feel like proof of a fundamental, unchangeable flaw.
Okay, so that's the fixed mindset. What's the alternative? The growth mindset.
Right. The growth mindset offers a completely different perspective. Here, the belief is that your most basic abilities, your intelligence, your talents, they can be developed.
How?
Through dedication, through hard work, through learning, through strategy. Intelligence and talent are seen as just starting points, not some kind of fixed destiny.
So it's not about proving, it's about improving.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. This changes everything in terms of behavior. People with this mindset tend to embrace challenges. They see them as, opportunities to stretch themselves, to grow.
And mistakes, failure.
Mistakes aren't disasters. They're information,
Yeah.
data, opportunities to learn what doesn't work and try something else. Failure isn't a judgment on your inherent worth.
And effort. If it's bad in a fixed mindset.
In a growth mindset, effort is the hero. It's the path to mastery. It's not seen as a sign of weakness, but as the essential ingredient for getting better, for building ability.
So less worried about looking smart, more focused on actually learning.
Precisely. They're much more concerned with the process of getting better, of developing themselves.
These aren't just slight differences, are they? It sounds like they create totally different realities for people.
Fundamentally different. Let's dig into how that actually plays out. Like, what does it look like?
Okay, so someone deep in a fixed mindset, what are they doing? How are they feeling?
Well, there's often this constant internal monologue of evaluation, feeling judged by almost every experience. Is this making me look smart or dumb?
That sounds exhausting.
It is. There's this preoccupation with, yeah, looking smart and avoiding any situation, any task where they might not look smart, where they might stumble.
So they might avoid challenges.
Absolutely. Avoid challenging tasks, maybe give up more easily when things get tough, or even start blaming others or circumstances when failure does happen.
Because admitting they struggled or failed feels too threatening.
It confirms their deepest fear that they just aren't good enough in some fundamental way. It can also lead to a fear of effort itself, and sometimes even hiding deficiencies instead of addressing them. Failure defines you.
Okay, now contrast that with the growth mindset in action. What does that look like?
It's driven by a completely different engine, the desire to learn and develop. Challenges aren't threats. They're exciting. They're opportunities.
And mistake.
Informative. Necessary, even. Effort is seen as essential, the key ingredient.
So resilience must be higher.
Much higher. Setbacks are bumps in the road, not the end of the road. They bounce back faster, learn the lesson, and keep going.
Do they handle feedback differently?
Oh, absolutely. They're often much more likely to seek out constructive criticism. They actually want to know how they can improve. It's not taken personally as a judgment.
It really fosters this, love of learning, just wanting to get better continuously.
Exactly. A belief in continuous improvement, yeah.
This brings us to a really interesting point Dweck makes, challenging some pretty old assumptions about ability versus accomplishment.
Yeah, this is where it gets really counterintuitive for a lot of people. She questions that long-held idea that innate talent is the primary driver of major success.
You mean talent isn't everything?
Her research strongly suggests that no, it isn't. In fact, she shows how a growth mindset, even if someone starts out with maybe less obvious natural talent, can actually lead to greater achievement over time compared to someone with high initial ability but a fixed mindset.
So the belief system can actually trump raw talent.
In many cases, yes, because the growth mindset fuels the very behavior's persistence, learning from failure, embracing challenges that lead to significant accomplishment. The fixed mindset can actually stall development, even in talented individuals.
And this ties into how we praise people,
Right.
especially children.
Hugely important implications here. Dweck's studies on praise are, frankly, quite startling.
What did she find?
She found that praising kids for their effort, their strategies, the process they used, what she calls growth mindset praise, that leads to more sustained motivation, they become more resilient, and they actually achieve more.
Okay, praising effort is good. Makes sense.
But here's the kicker. Praising them for being smart or talented, fixed mindset praise
Yeah.
can actually backfire. It can undermine their motivation. It makes them more afraid of challenges because they don't want to do anything that might disprove that smart label.
So telling a kid they're brilliant might actually make them less likely to take on hard things.
Exactly. It can make them more risk-averse and surprisingly more fragile when they do inevitably fail at something. They crumble more easily because failure now questions their core smartness.
Wow. That's profound. It really highlights the critical role of effort and persistence in unlocking potential, maybe more than we realized.
It reframes the whole picture of achievement.
Let's look at how this plays out in different arenas. Sports is a classic example she uses.
Oh yeah, you see it so clearly in sports. Think about athletes. You have those who seem to rely entirely on their natural gifts, the fixed mindset types.
What happens to them?
Often they might struggle under pressure, joke in big moments, or be quick to blame teammates, coaches, refs when things go wrong. They haven't necessarily developed the resilience that comes from seeing challenges as growth opportunities.
And the growth mindset athletes.
They're the ones you see relentlessly practicing, analyzing their mistakes, always looking for ways to improve their technique, their strategy, their conditioning. They demonstrate incredible resilience after losses.
So the true champions, the Jordans, the Williams sisters she talks about.
Often, yes. They aren't just talented. They embody that growth mindset. They embrace the hard work, the constant learning, the pushing of limits. That's often what separates the good from the truly great and enduring.
Okay, let's shift to the business world. How does mindset impact leadership?
It has a massive impact on organizational culture. Leaders with a fixed mindset. Well, they often see talent as fixed in their employees too, meaning they might be less likely to invest in development. They might be more focused on proving their own brilliance, surrounding themselves with people who make them look good rather than challenging them.
Sounds like it could create a pretty toxic environment.
It often does. Cultures of fear, blame, stagnation. Employees are afraid to take risks, admit errors, or propose innovative ideas that might fail. The focus is on appearing competent, not necessarily on growing competence. These leaders can sometimes be quite self-aggrandizing.
Right, and the growth mindset leaders.
They create entirely different environments. One's based on learning, innovation, collaboration. They see potential in people and invest in developing it.
How does that show up?
They value feedback, even critical feedback. They encourage smart risk-taking and experimentation, understanding that failure is part of innovation. They prioritize developing their people and the organization as a whole.
Which leads to more sustainable success, you'd imagine.
Definitely. More adaptability, more resilience, more genuine growth for the company and the people in it.
And what about our personal lives, relationships?
Oh, mindset plays a huge role here too. Think about navigating conflicts or challenges in a partnership or friendship.
So a fixed mindset in relationships. What does that look like? Believing your partner is fundamentally flawed if you disagree.
Kind of, yeah. It can lead to defensiveness, a lot of blame. There's this underlying belief that relationships are either meant to be or not. If there's conflict, maybe it just wasn't meant to be.
So no room for working through things.
Less room, certainly. Disagreements or problems are seen as signs of fundamental incompatibility, rather than opportunities to understand each other better and grow together. The relationship itself is seen as a fixed entity.
Okay, so the growth mindset approach.
That fosters a belief that relationships, like people, can evolve and improve with effort. It encourages empathy, open communication, and a real willingness to work through challenges.
Seeing problems as opportunities to strengthen the bond.
Exactly. It's built on the belief that you can learn about each other, adapt, and build a stronger connection through mutual effort and understanding. It leads to much more resilient and ultimately fulfilling relationships.
It seems like these mindsets touch almost every part of life. Where does Dweck say they actually come from? Are we born with one?
She argues they're largely learned, and she points really powerfully to the profound influence of parents, teachers, coaches, the key adults in a child's life.
Through the messages they send. It's like the praise thing we talked about.
Precisely. She really hammers home the dangers of praising only intelligence or talent. You're so smart. You're a natural. While well-intentioned, this can inadvertently push a child towards a fixed mindset.
Because they become afraid of losing that label.
Yes, afraid to try hard things where they might fail and not look smart anymore.
So what's the alternative? How do adults cultivate a growth mindset?
By praising the process. Praising effort, the strategies they use, their perseverance through difficulty, their improvement, the learning itself. You worked so hard on that. That was a clever strategy you tried. I see how much you've improved.
Focusing on the actions, not just the label.
Exactly. And importantly, Dweck also clarified later that it's not just praising any effort, like banging your head against a wall. It's about praising effective effort, smart strategies, seeking help, learning from mistakes. Effort combined with good approaches.
That makes sense. Effort needs direction.
Right. And it's not just about the words we use. Dweck also emphasizes that adults need to model a growth mindset themselves.
Walk the talk.
Absolutely. If kids see adults embracing challenges, persisting through setbacks, talking about their own learning process, that's incredibly powerful. They learn by watching how we handle difficulty.
Okay, so they're learned, which means they can be changed.
Yes. And that, I think, is the most hopeful and empowering message in the entire book. Your mindset isn't fixed. You're not stuck.
That's huge. How does she offer a way to actually change it?
She does. She outlines a pretty practical 4-step process for actively cultivating a growth mindset.
Okay, what's step one?
Step 1 is just learning to hear your fixed mindset voice, becoming aware of it.
What does that sound like?
It's that internal critic, the voice of doubt. I can't do this. What if I fail? I'm not smart enough. This proves I'm no good at X. Just noticing when that voice pops up.
Okay, awareness first. Step 2.
Recognize that you have a choice. When you hear that fixed mindset voice, understand that it's just one interpretation. You don't have to believe it or act on it. You can choose a different response.
Moment of agency there.
Exactly. Which leads to step 3. Talk back to the fixed mindset voice with a growth mindset voice.
How do you do that?
You actively challenge the negative fixed thoughts, replace them with constructive growth-oriented ones. So instead of, I can't do it, maybe this is challenging, but I can learn how to do it. Instead of, I failed, maybe, okay, that approach didn't work. What can I try next?
Reframe the inner dialogue.
Yes. Frame effort as positive, challenges as opportunities, setbacks as learning moments.
And the final step, step 4.
Take the growth mindset action. Don't just think differently, act differently. Put the growth mindset into practice.
Meaning?
Meaning, embrace the challenge you were shying away from. Persist when things get difficult instead of giving up. Ask for help or feedback. Focus on the process of learning and improving. Actually do the things a growth mindset encourages.
So it's learn, choose, challenge, act.
That's a good summary. And critically, she emphasizes this isn't like flipping a switch, it's a journey. It takes ongoing awareness and conscious effort. You might slip back into fixed thinking, especially when stressed or facing big challenges. The key is to notice it and gently redirect yourself back to growth.
It requires continuous practice.
Definitely. Self-awareness and deliberate practice.
Okay, reflecting on the book overall, what are its biggest strengths? Why has it been so influential?
Well, first, the clarity. Dweck writes in such accessible language. She avoids dense academic jargon, making these really powerful psychological ideas understandable to almost anyone.
Yeah, it's very readable.
And it's not just, pop psychology. It's grounded in decades of solid research. There's strong empirical evidence behind the concepts.
Examples help too, right?
Massively. The stories of athletes, CEOs, students, people in relationships, they make the mindsets come alive. You see the tangible impact.
And it feels actionable. It gives you tools.
Yes. The practical strategies for change are key. It doesn't just diagnose, it offers a path forward. And ultimately, the core message is just incredibly empowering. It gives people agency over their own development and resilience.
But like any influential theory, it's probably worth considering some nuances or potential criticisms.
For sure. No theory explains everything perfectly. One point sometimes raised is that the fixed growth dichotomy, while powerful, can be a bit of a simplification of complex human psychology. Well, people aren't always purely one or the other. You might have a growth mindset about your career, but a more fixed one about, say, your artistic ability.
Or even fluctuate depending on the day or the specific situation.
Exactly. It's often more of a spectrum or context dependent than two completely separate boxes.
That seems fair. Anything else?
Another important nuance, which Dweck herself acknowledges, is that effort alone isn't always enough. While crucial, you also need effective strategies, good instruction, access to resources sometimes.
Right. Just trying harder without changing your approach might not work.
Precisely. Pure persistence without smart strategy or needed support isn't the whole picture. Success involves mindset plus effective action and enabling conditions.
And you mentioned earlier the clarification about praising effective effort, not just any effort.
Yes, that's a crucial clarification Dweck made later, sometimes called the false growth mindset issue, just telling kids great effort. When they're using a poor strategy and getting nowhere isn't helpful. It's about praising effort linked to learning, progress, and finding better strategies.
Understanding those nuances seems important for applying the ideas effectively.
Definitely. It helps avoid a superficial, just try harder interpretation.
So wrapping up, Dweck's mindset really offers this incredibly useful framework for thinking about thinking itself.
It really does. It gives you actionable insights into how you can cultivate a way of thinking that's more adaptive, more resilient, and ultimately probably more successful and fulfilling.
By understanding how much our beliefs about ability shape our reality, we gain this amazing power, really, to influence our own learning, our growth, our achievements.
It puts the keys back in your hands in many ways.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. What does this mean for you right now?
Yeah, take a moment and consider where in your life, maybe your job, a hobby, a relationship, learning something new, where might you have been operating with a fixed mindset, maybe without even realizing it? Where have you perhaps limited yourself?
And then what could potentially happen if, starting today, you consciously decided to apply a growth mindset in just that one area?
What challenge might you embrace? What skill could you develop? What setback could you learn from differently? What outcome that seemed fixed might suddenly become possible?
Not just for you, maybe, but also for the people around you, the minds you might influence just by shifting your own.